Hello friends, thank you for joining me again today. I'll do my little clapper thing in just a minute. You know, the little clapper thing. So this is a painting I started last Friday evening. This right now, I just can't believe it. It's Thursday already. The weeks fly by, don't they? So this is a painting I started last Friday. I think that was November 2nd, but don't hold me to that. Knowing dates is not one of my strong suits, unless I look at my clock or my watch or something. All right, I think that's enough. Maybe, yeah, a little bit more yellow right here. This craziness. Hey, okay, before I get into it though, before I get into this craziness, let's get legal. This is, of course, Daily Art Adventure. Read it yourself. Number 758, Triangle Apartment Association Celebration 35th Anniversary. Last Friday, now finishing in my studio. I will admit that I've been painting up here in my studio on this for an hour and a half, maybe, something like that, in acrylics. So I have the entire drawing very close to where I want it to be, very close to accurate, so I don't have to, now that I'm going on to oil, I don't have to sweat about have I got perspective and figures and things like that right. And I just did these crazy paint sticks. If you were to ask me, the answer is no. Do I know anybody else that uses paint sticks in this general manner? The answer is no, I do not. I don't know anybody. There certainly may be some. There's a lot of people in the world. But I didn't learn it from anybody else. It just has emerged slowly in my own adventures. And right now, of course, I'm doing the oil glaze. Glaze, glaze, glaze. Glaze could be my middle name. Daniel Glaze Nelson. Yes, guilty as charged. All you any early journey painters happen to be watching me, you would do well to emulate. You'd do well to learn the practice of glazing. You've taken very many classes from very many people. It's very likely you've not really, in most painters, glaze is like one of the tools in their toolbox, maybe roughly akin to the way I would use, say, a palette knife. It's one of the things they do. And I would recommend that it not be just one of the tools in your toolbox. I would recommend that it be part of your normal operating system. Glazing is go-to technique. In the last 15 years, you may ask, unless I was doing an illustration perhaps, have I ever done a painting in the last 15, oil or acrylic painting in the last 15 years, in which I did not glaze? The answer would be quickly, no, 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 absolutely not. Not one painting where I did not do, in most cases, several layers of acrylic glaze and several layers of, or at least one layer of oil glaze. So, and the reason that the 20th century lost the magic of transparency, which is the same thing. When I say transparent, you hear glaze. When I say glaze, you hear transparent, okay? Glaze is always transparent, like glass, always transparent. And again, the fact that so many early journey painters that I even have to stress such a thing shows me how far we have fallen. Hang on, okay, hang on, I need to evidently tighten down my easel here. Do I have anybody watching yet? Oh yeah, a few chaps. Welcome, chaps. I started to say a little while ago, do I know anybody else that uses these oil sticks? I have two brands here. This is made by R&F. And most of the ones I have in this kit are made by Shiva. So I'm not married to any particular brand, but they are in fact sticks of oil paint. Not to be confused with oil pastels, okay? They are not oil pastels. They are sticks of oil paint. Now, since I mentioned that, the question you may have is, well, then don't they dry? And the answer is yes. If I haven't used them for a couple days, they have a thin skin. They've skinned over. And it used to be that I would take a tissue or something and wipe off the skin, so to speak, the skinification, since that seems to be the kind of language I like. And then use it. And I've since discovered I really don't need to do that. Just go ahead and give it a good, vigorous rub on your canvas, and the skin will slough off without any trouble. I've never had any problem with that same skin, looking like a flake, like a chip of dried paint or semi-dried paint. Never seen that at all. So. That I can remember. Anyway, so no, I don't know anybody else that uses them in that manner. I just started using them really in this past year, and their use has grown slightly. And I usually try to remember to use them, as I'm doing right here, right before. Now, I don't use them with acrylics, of course, because they're oil paints, but I do use them right prior to doing an oil glaze. And as you can see, so I've discovered, I put them on pretty boldly, as you saw a few minutes ago, but after doing a glaze, their impact is greatly diminished. And if I want it diminished any more, then I just continue to rub wherever I put those. Does that make sense? So again, you may ask, well, who'd you learn that from? And I'll have to claim that I didn't learn it from anybody. I just made it up. I'm one of those kind of people. One of the words, I was reminded of this not too long ago, one of the words that describes my type of, one aspect of my personality. I am not common, but I'm not rare either. And that is, I'm an autodidact. That's a highfalutin term. It just means I'm a person who teaches himself. There are a number of people in the world that's like me. That is one aspect of your character. That has good and bad sides about it. I'm not bragging that I'm an autodidact. In fact, sometimes I would feel kind of complaining about that. I think of all the things I could have learned if somebody had taught me, or if I'd taken advantage of, the opportunities open to me in decades past. I think of how much faster progress I could have made as an artist. And go, maybe I shouldn't have been such an all-fired autodidact. But be that as it may, that's the downside. The good side is autodidacts, like myself, we discover stuff, we invent stuff. We are, in fact, and another name for an autodidact is a pioneer, a pathfinder, an inventor. That's people like me invent stuff. And again, that's not bragging. That's just the way it is. It has some positive characteristics and has some negative ones. The negative is I could have learned this quicker if I learned from somebody else. That's the downside. The positive side is I invent stuff and pass it on to you guys. And many people can benefit. All right, so I think I've succeeded here in covering the entire canvas, and that is critical, by the way. I do cover the entire canvas with oil. several reasons, the most silly of which is I want it to be an oil painting, not oil painting with little bits of acrylic showing through. Okay, and the other reasons I'm not even going to get into. I'm going to drop these because they're kind of big, and cleaning them would stir up quite a bit of stuff in the air, and I don't want it. Speaking of stuff in the air, I am upstairs in my studio. I'm using Liquin Original Gel, which product I really love. The only downside of it, for any of you thinking about using it, is it is smelly. And if you can smell it, that means it's going into your body and into your system. I do have a ceiling fan. If I stuck my left hand up, it would hit the fan. I have a ceiling fan going. I have 2 windows, and I don't, right at the moment, have an air conditioning unit in the windows, as I often do. But I have 2 windows wide open on my left and a door open there, so not quite ideal. It's a little more smelly in here than I would like at the moment. If I continue to feel that way in a few minutes, I'll pause this broadcast, and I'll just go somewhere else, practice my trumpet for 20 minutes, and then come back when the atmosphere is clear, literally. All right, at the moment, however, I've got 2 cotton rags, and I'm, as you can see, I'm removing, lifting out the glaze to create a lightening effect again. So my painting got quite a bit darker, and I don't know if you could see this on the video. It depends on a number of things, I suppose, but all of the colors on the whole painting became considerably richer, really way more fun to look at when I put that glaze on that, no matter what color it was. And I did almost the entire glaze, by the way, in oxide red, which of course is a brown, right? It's like burnt sienna, oxide red. Don't be confused by the name. It's brown. It looks a lot like burnt sienna. Anyway, so almost the whole canvas got burnt sienna, and then a little bit of ultramarine here and there, right? And then I wiped off. So I used big brushes to put on, and fairly big rag, and likewise I'm going to drop those on the floor. Probably those will go in the trash shortly, but I'm not necessarily done glazing, so let's stick with the task at hand for just a minute. I'm a little bit low on chip brushes over here. I didn't. All right, I've got a 1.5 inch and a 2 inch that's falling apart. I love cheap brushes. All right. Not because they're cheap. Well, that too, of course. I don't mind. It's nice that they're cheap. It is nice that my favorite brushes in the whole world are also the cheapest brushes in the world. What a break. Well, then of course my other favorite brushes are Winsor Newton Series 7, some of the most expensive. So there you go, you know. I'm doing some phthalo blue here. And again, I will probably follow this up with a little bit of wiping off, but I want a more intense blue 2 places. One is this ice sculpture. I don't know if you could tell, if you were with me last week, maybe you remember that this is an ice sculpture. Yeah, a little blue there and there, and I think that's all I need. I'll do a little bit down here. Oh yeah, that was nice. Right, before I abandon the glazing process, let's go ahead and make sure that if I want to do any more vignetting, everybody knows what a vignette is, right? A vignette is darkened corners. So I've turned the word vignette into a verb. To vignette is to make the corners darker, and then is it the gerund form of that? Vignetting, or present present active indicative form. I don't know. I'm out on that dangerous. Anyway, to vignette your paintings, to make the corners dark, is, I always want to point out, it is not an absolute rule. It is not, it's just, often it looks good, but you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. There are some paintings that look better fading to light at the bottom, or, you know, at the corners. I mean, I meant to say it, one of the corners. But I was thinking of the bottom corner when I said it, so it came out wrong. But so far, I'm looking at these two corners, the two upper corners, and saying, yeah. You know what? Having them go dark looks to me like a good idea. So my grandchildren call me Bigka, which is a name that I love. I like it better than Grandpa. Think about it. Would you rather be a Bigka or a Grandpa? If you're cool like me, that is. And you're under 75. I'll be Gramps soon enough to everybody. But until then, I'm Bigka. Anyway, they say, if my grandchildren, who are here a lot, they say, Bigka, why'd you do that? Remember, the answer is always, for the artist, I've discovered, the answer is always the same. Why'd you do that? The answer is because I think it's going to look cool. Because I think it's going to look cool. Because I think it's going to make it a better painting. See, what a difference that is from the, forgive me, the crap I got in college, which was too often laced with, if I use the same question, Bigka, why'd you do that? And the answer would have to be, because I'm trying to express myself. That whole self-expression crap. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And most of you guys, if you're not an artist, you're going, what? What? I thought that's what art was all about. Well, yeah, that's because you swallowed the Kool-Aid, dude. No, art is not about self-expression. It's been going on for millennia. Only if I can be a little bit something. Too late, I'm already being a lot of something. A rant, I guess. If David's here, he'll say, rant alert or something. Correct. Guilty as charged. You can almost put the expressionist, that is the theory that art is about self-expression, you can almost put it on the calendar and the map. The answer is 1907, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so forgive me. Before 1907, and you didn't know it's that specific, did you? Yeah. I mean, an expert historian could argue with me, but the rest of you, no, you can't. Unless you know more than I do. And I probably just demonstrated that I know more than you do on the subject. All right. The Armory Show, New York, and forgive me, I think it's 1907. The Armory Show, a very specific art show, 1907, New York City, is when, if you will, this is slight exaggeration, but only slight exaggeration in service of a truth, is Armory Show 1907 New York City is where the world was introduced, I'm going to say, to this cockamamie idea that art is all about the artist expressing himself. Now, I could go on for another hour giving a brilliant lecture on art and self-expression, but I'm not going to. I don't have the energy for that today. No doubt it'll come out some other time in another rant, but not today. But just put it down, look it up. Anyway, so why Bigka, my name? Why'd you do that? And the answer is because, not being an expressionist, but in fact an aesthetist, a fancy way of saying I'm an artist who's into beauty. So the answer would be because I think it's going to make it a more beautiful painting. All right. So why did I vignette the corners? There you go. More beautiful painting. I'm still continuing to dark certain areas of the painting, and I don't think I'm going to darken this corner because I like how that's fading to a medium intense orange. I kind of like the energy of that for some reason. All right, I'm going to throw those brushes down as well and clean those up later. I will take them up to the garage, actually, literally, to clean those. And once again, ragging out a little bit, if you can let me use that term, lifting out the blue here. All right, let me point out one of the chief goals and purposes that I have in doing my initial oil glaze is to bring a heightened degree of cohesion. Okay, I mean, cohesion means to hang together, stick together, okay? So I'm using the term, I want to bring a higher degree of cohesion, hanging together, of my composition, right? And I very often use my initial oil glaze to do that. It's exactly what I'm trying to do here. And it's working fairly well. Let me go ahead and explain. While I do that, let me, I'm going to clean my hands here a minute, because I've got junk on them from picking up those rags. Okay, there. Just used some kind of cleaner. O'Keefe's. You know it's good. Georgia made it. That's a joke. Okay, so composition. I use the glaze to bring my painting to a higher degree of hang-togetherness. And one of the simplest rules of composition, probably the one that I utilize more than any other, is one way to describe a good composition is either the dark zone or dark zones or the light zones can be described essentially in one word. And indeed, I have it. It was hinted at before I did the glaze, but it's become more obvious. And let me turn you around so you can get a frontal view. Let me see how it looks, because you have to ignore that big glare. Okay, now you're getting glare from my window, but that's better than the light. And you're still getting glare from this light, of course. Okay, but I think you can see it. I could call it several things. I could say there's a U. Everything's dark, but the light is a U shape. And some of you say, yeah, but you've got light over here and light over there. And I'd say, yeah, but it's relative. The light over here is small and not as light as here. Plus, I'm going to push this. I'm going to exaggerate this as in the final edit layers. A little bit of light up there, but again, it's even darker than here, and it's fairly small. But what is light is this. It gets a little dark down here, so, you know, is this, can I call this, I think I can call this connected because of this. So it's a U, but then it really does have this light corner, so I guess I'd call it a tipping over V, an italicized V. So my light is a V shape. Got it? One word, V. Got it? So it really helps to be able to see your composition before you're finished with the painting. Duh. Because now I'm going to be keeping that in mind. So if I start working in any of these dark areas, I'm going to be very conscious, because I'm going to be adding light to them, but I'm going to be conscious of the fact that, ooh, be careful. I don't want anything too light in here because it will start crumbling. My composition will start falling apart. Likewise, in here I'll be doing dark areas in the light zone, but I have to keep that relatively dark, because I don't want these areas to start getting dark. Does that make sense? So from here on out in the painting, I'll be aware of those things, and that helps me not only keep the composition, but actually push it a little bit more. The other day, a couple weeks ago, I came up with a new term for me. It dawned on me. I don't think I heard anybody else. I can't remember. Heard anybody else use it, but I said the word is trans shape. Let me describe what I mean by trans shape. First of all, there are shapes in this painting, and they're what I call picture shapes. The most obvious is this, whatever this ice sculpture is a shape. There's a shape. You with me? There's a saxophone player shape. There's people's and chairs shape. There's a bunch of beer bottle shapes and people shapes and a photo umbrella shape and a woman shape, outdoor building shape. Okay, none of that is what I'm talking about. Okay, they're significant, but they're drawing issues. They're picture issues. What makes a composition is not picture shapes, but trans shapes. That is, shapes that go across or transcend the picture shapes. So that's what I just described for you. I have, you could say, a shaft of light coming down here, and another one, a vertical shaft of light just about right there. And then if I connect them in the middle, then they're kind of a, you know, generally speaking, a V shape. I do remember in college, in art history, I do remember the professor showing us pictures, paintings from going back hundreds of years and pointing out all these things. And I was, at the time, somewhat suspicious, skeptical, I should say, as to whether the artist, I was going, really? Did the artist really see this, you know, this mountain shape or this V shape and all that kind of stuff? I was kind of, I wasn't sure. It seemed like a bit of a stretch. But standing where I am now at age 65 no, I don't have any trouble believing. Yes, I think that those things were intentional. It was simply my exposure to a new idea. It was my lack of visual acuity that made it hard for me to see. And of course, those things have been developed and pushed quite a bit over the years. I'm happy to say there's not an awful lot of work I need to do to this painting. I could really stop right now, couldn't I? And I am inclined, because I took the acrylic stage somewhat more further than I often do. But there are a few things I want to do. And I'm debating whether to do fuzz layer right now. Indeed, I'm going to do a little bit of fuzz. I don't want to go, as I sometimes do, I don't want to go hog wild. I don't want to go crazy. Whoops, I need some titanium white. I sure hope I have some here. I do, okay. I don't want to go crazy because mostly because I just like the painting just the way it is. And I don't want to do a whole lot of stuff that will require a whole lot of modification. My clients saw the painting, and it's the state that it was in at the end of the event last Friday, and they seemed quite happy with it. Not a surprise, you know, they're not used to seeing paintings, real paintings, come together. Most people think Bob Ross, that's how it was done. So I know they'll be quite happy with this if they see it. But I'm going to do some fuzz. Let me see if that's not quite the right color. Not the right color, not quite the right intensity. Since this ice sculpture, by the way, let me talk about the assignment that I ended up faced with last week when I got to my destination and so on. I had a meeting, a prior meeting with my clients, and talked about, you know, what I might do, where I might set up, and so on. And indeed, as you can see, I've ended up doing what I would call a montage. It was a very challenging, in this regard, it was a very challenging assignment because there was no one thing in the building, and it occupied several ballrooms, you know, several public areas of this hotel, Embassy Suite Hotel. But there was no one thing that really, really jumped out as the iconic symbol of the evening, except for this ice sculpture, which was in the middle of this big I almost said cafeteria, in the middle of this big banquet room. So indeed, and again, no surprise, my client, our discussion had led me to think that may be the case, and indeed, turns out it was. So that's why I've made the ice sculpture really is as close as it can come to a focal point. Now, beyond that, I've done a montage. I'll just run you real quickly. Here's a picture of the outside of the hotel. They hired a saxophone player who wandered around with a microphone and, you know, did some real nice jazzy sax, soprano sax stuff. This later in the evening, they had a dance floor and a DJ. So many of you know that's a DJ. I already talked about the ice. Really, this picture right here, the top is the ceiling of the banquet conference room. People sitting, a person at the microphone at a lectern, and people up here getting awards, blah, 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 blah. So this is like all one scene, but this is the focal point. Over here, they had a photo booth, just for fun. People go, and of course, they had a lot of bars of drinks, and with handsome and pretty people. And also not so handsome, not so pretty. I'm being silly, standing around. And I have, of course, photographs of all this stuff. I was using it quite a bit a little while ago to do the painting the details. And right now, I want to see a photograph of. Wouldn't you know, it's the one that I can't find when I'm talking to you guys. That's crazy. I had it. It was here just a minute ago. Hang on. I do want to. It's got to be right here. I want to see the shape of the chairs that the people are sitting in. There we go. Not the shape, but the. Okay, these bars are brown. I wasn't sure if they were metallic or not, and they're brown. No big deal, but you know, a little detail like that. There's no point to change it then, to make it something else. So I'll just leave it the way it is. Let's come up here and give some of these people just a little fuzz of color. Okay, that's enough of that. I'm going to do a little bit more fuzz in a warm tone now. So I did fuzz here. I just messed up with opaque pale blue, but of course applied very thinly, so it's no longer opaque, but instead is translucent. If you're a regular, you know the drill well. I'm not going to do some. Well, before I leave the blue, I should have done this. I'm going to do a little bit of sky over in the, there's a little tiny bit of the painting that is landscape-ish, right? Let me talk, I started to bring up the subject then of montage, or doing a montage at an event painting. It is a solution that clients who are not artists often prefer because they're not artists. They can't visualize anything better than a montage, and I usually feel like it's my idea to help to do, in fact, yes, envision something better. But when I got there, it's like, no, I could not envision any better solution than, in fact, than a montage. So that's what I ended up doing. The challenge and why I don't love doing montages is it's really hard to maintain a cohesive composition when it's a montage. Does that make sense? I talked earlier about trans shapes versus, so again, just a little tip for what it's worth. Rather than doing what some people might call a collage, which is where you sort of cut out all the pictures and stick them on, most of my call out or inset, in or out, call out, inset images have a border. I've included a border. You see a border around the painting of the hotel. Here, a round border around the saxophone player. Here, there's a square around the drink bar and a square. Let me point out, after having mentioned that, there's one that has no border around it at all. That's the DJ. Let me next point out, though, that in no case is the border complete. So here, there's a border here, here, and here, but none at the bottom. Here, there's one at the top, but the umbrella goes through it. There's one here, nothing at the bottom. Oh, and in other words, and over here, 3 borders, none here. The only one that goes all the way around is the saxophone player, but again, his legs violate, is the word, go over the circle. So again, just all tricks that I feel like I've learned over the years, not only as a painter, but as an illustrator and even as a graphic designer. Here's a go, little tricks that help the dreadful montage be a little bit less dreadful. So if you're getting the impression that I don't like doing montages, you are getting the correct impression. But do I think does it work as a reminder of the evening? So they understand that the company has paid me quite well, in my opinion. It's nice to have that opinion. I'm being paid to create a commemoration of this event. It was a 35th anniversary celebration, you know. I'm being paid to create an image that everybody who attended, even those who didn't attend, will look at it and go, oh, that looks like it was a fun night, right? But those who did, I want them to go, oh yeah, for it all to flood back when they look at it. So that's my assignment. And in this case, I felt like a montage was in fact a good solution to that. Not my favorite, but it's sometimes a good solution in spite of my druthers, my resistance. Okay, little bit more, not too much, a little bit more fuzz. This time some warm white stuff. Pale yellow, you could say. All of my paints, I'm discovering it. I brought them up to my studio out of the freezer yesterday, and then ended up never painting all day. So my paintings were here in my studio most of yesterday and all night. So as you can imagine, they're all skinned over. Still usable in my opinion, just you have to be a little bit careful. Okay, so a little bit of glow up here. You might, if you watched me paint this last week, you might remember that in actuality, the curtain, the cyc behind these speakers, there were white bands here, but this was completely black. And honestly, I didn't even realize that I was changing that until late in the painting process, because I was operating at a proper intuition that should not be black. And then late in the process, I went, wait a minute, that's supposed to be black. And I went, heck no, that would be a mistake. So, again, just a little bit of fuzz here and there. I want to be careful not to get too many hard edges in this painting. It would be really easy to do. All right, you know that, don't you? Too many hard edges is like the proverbial falling off a log. Too many hard edges is, most of us, that is our default setting. Most of me at the front of the pack, okay? I'm at the front of the pack when it comes to doing the mistake of too many hard edges. How could you dare blame me of making such a silly mistake? Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, me, we're talking about me, yeah. I make that. That made it for decades. Literally for decades. I still fight against it. So for me, this fuzz layer is at least one way to help fight against the overpreponderance of hard edges. Just intentionally make some really messy marks. Messy, messy, messy marks. Not my native style, I promise you. It still takes a little bit of my, you know, my heart is in my throat, so to speak, a little bit, because I feel like, no, 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 I'm messing it up. But I have learned that, oh, after the edit layer, it's like, oh, I didn't mess it up. How about that? Sure looked like it at the time. I'm going to find a clean rag here. I'm going to unmess just a tiny bit of that. Generally I like that glow. I covered up the woman. It looks like a woman at the lectern, so that's the way it's going to be. I think it was mostly women that were making, you know, presentations and speeches the other night. There might have been some men, but every time I looked up, it seems like it was a woman, so perfectly appropriate. All right, I think I'm done. Yahoo. Always fun to finish a phase. Next thing is either dark details with brushes or pencil. And one of the factors that I use to make that decision is if there's already a lot of pencil or enough pencil showing, then I don't feel compelled to do more. And that is the way I feel about most of the paintings, so I'm going to make an exception here. Most of the painting has plenty of the scratchy pencil marks. You remember, I use the pencils partly for drawing, of course, but more than that, I use them simply because I like the texture. I just like the scratchy, liney stuff that is pencil marks. I like the juxtaposition. The next to-ness of all right, I think that's enough now. I may very well add more pencil late in the process, but not right now. Clean up my palette just a little bit with a razor. I have a glass palette, so when I run out of room for mixing, I just scrape it up with a razor. All right, so now it is a little bit of dark detail. I don't need much because I'm happy to report that the painting seems to be hanging together pretty well already. And the darks are sufficient. One of the purposes of this dark phase. So this is what I would call another drawing phase of the painting. And most of the time I've counted up, I do roughly or exactly 12 different stages of drawing. Not too many weeks ago I posted, you know, Dan Nelson's process for painting, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. So I know it's there on my YouTube community page. So if you want to see what are the 12 steps, you can look those up without too much trouble. One of the functions I was going to started to say of this phase, this stage of the painting process, is to make sure that I have sufficient darks in the painting. I am the kind of person, not everybody does this, but I like a full range of values. I think, for instance, of Ansel Adams, his famous black and white photographs, mid-20th century. 20th century. one of the things that was so beautiful about his paintings, and by the way, his techniques were quite extreme. If you haven't read, his darkroom techniques were crazy, and part of his genius. Anyway, his black and white photographs are just jaw-dropping in their richness, from black, 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 and just as black as velvet, and all the way to pure white, and everything, every gradation in between. So that to me is a good look. You can tell by the the orgasmic rapture I'm experiencing. I usually use that term. To be fair, I used to use that term, maybe I still will, when I describe some of my art professors talking about art history. They would have orgasmic rapture when they were talking about, the drippy guy. What was his name? And then they'd have, forgive me, it's rated PG-13 today. They have a more orgasmic rapture when they were describing Piet Mondrian and Hans, what's his name? Anyway, and I thought it was all a bit much. Now that opinion, I still share. I still think it was a bit much. Anyway, how did I get on that? The point I was trying to make is that I like full range of values. I've heard some, and admittedly decent painters, say that that full range of values does not exist in nature, and I'm inclined to agree with them. So if I was trying to replicate accurately, especially a nature scene, I probably would not have any number 10 blacks in my painting and number 0 whites. You'd stop a little bit shy of each one. And in fact, actually, I don't have any number 10 blacks in here, but I want to give the impression that I do. Anyway, all it is to say, I'm one of those blokes who really likes full range of values. So when you're doing this final, I'm saying as if you're going to do it, right? But when I'm doing this, my last dark drawing, right before I go to final edit, which comes next, one of the functions of this is to make sure that I have adequate darks. Now, of course, I can cheat and come back and add dark later, but I don't like to cheat if I can help it. I like to accomplish, each thing in its right order. And at the moment, the right thing is adequate darks. And good news is the painting already has plenty of dark in it, so I think I can actually stop right there. Yahoo! As I said, it's always fun to come to the end of another phase. So now, the next layer is the final edit layer. For many years it was in fact the final layer, but as you know, my technique has continued to evolve over the years. So now I have at least 2 steps, if not 3, after the final edit. But the final edit layer is still really, I guess I'd have to say, the most important layer. And the term final edit to me really expresses accurately the significance of this, because the final edit, if you're a writer, if you're writing music, if you're writing literature, anything else, the final edit is the final edit. This is before it goes out the door. Sometimes I also describe the final edit layer as light, opaque highlights, because that also is an accurate description of this phase. Now, why light? Well, a whole bunch of reasons. The broadest is human animal. Human eyeballs do not like seeing dark paint on top of light. But we like seeing light paint on top of darker. We like seeing paint get lighter. And that's reflected in the ubiquitous art professor statement, darks first, lights last. I just maintain that truism is true many levels, including this one. Now I'm into the lights last phase of that. The final edit layer. Oh, and you guys are now chatting up a storm, and I'm completely ignoring you. Welcome, all you guys. Let me look at you real quickly. Tell you, I'll turn myself around just for fun. Uncle, good to see you. Good, yeah. Uncle, I did fill out my form to get my new camera today. Thank you very much. I don't have it yet, but it's on the way. Hello, Tomas. Funny stories that happen at openings. Yes, I'll try to remember. Thank you. I'll try to remember to do that, Tomas, in a minute. Dan, do you like to start with any specific oil glaze color? Does it depend on the color scheme of the painting? Yeah, answer B. It depends on the color scheme of the painting. Now, my most common go-to, as you saw earlier, is oxide red and ultramarine blue. But that, I don't think that's a universal thing. That's just because of where my paintings usually end up. I want them warmer and darker and more intense color. Permanent rose is often very good, and phthalo blue, which I used here, is often very good. And when I say oxide red, I often mix Indian yellow and orange in that as well to make it even more. But no, it's mostly, it depends on the color scheme. Can I explain that white umbrella and white washing machine looking thing in the upper corner? Yeah, I can. No, not for long. Here, let me see if I can find the photograph, which is not a good copy of the photo, you know, but yeah, here it is. So here's the photograph with paint on it. Umbrella, and then basically a sign and two computer boxes on stands and a table and people in the background. So there's people in the background. The star of the show is this pretty young lady leaning across and pushing buttons on her computer. So that's what's going on there. If you weren't there, it's pretty hard to understand. I can understand that. Bigka. I think it's B-I-G-K-A. Bigka. Bigka. B-I-G-K-A. And the backside is weird. You know, you might be right, David. I'll shave her down a little bit. Hello, Marlene Miller. Good to have you on board. Oh, good for you, Marlene, doing a montage of your deceased son-in-law. Bless your heart. Yeah, sorry to hear that indeed. And David's talking about more white, and indeed, that is exactly correct. I'm saving the real sharp edge white for the final edit layer. Not all the way around it, of course, but much more jumping off than it is right now. You're exactly correct. Hello, Susan. No, Uncle, I don't think you'll be able to not chat. Next time. Jason, there's a new comment from a new viewer, I think. Jason, good to have you saying hi to us. 35th anniversary of Triangle. That's the part of the North Carolina that we live in. Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hills, the Triangle. The Triangle Apartment Association. So I didn't know there was such a thing, of course. All right, thank you. Caught up with your chat, so let's get back to work. There's also a possibility that the organizers of this event, my clients, are going to take my streamed videos and speed them up into like a, 5 or 10 minute video or something. All right, not dark, light opaque highlights, final edit layer. Always one of the questions is, where do you start? And two of the options are the lightest, brightest object and the focal point. In this case, I think those are two separate things. I think this is a focal point, the ice sculpture. but the lightest thing might be just a little bit over to the right. Let me think about that for a minute. Often, not always, I'll start with the thing that might be bothering me a little bit, or the thing that I'm scared of, the thing that I'm a little worried about. I'm not sure I'm going to do that now, but just to let you know, there's one of the factors I do. No, I think I'm going to have fun with the ice sculpture, so I'm going to start over here. What I pointed to, where I think the lightest area of this painting is going to be, not counting little bright light highlights, like on the ice sculpture. There'll be a little sparkle. There'll be a lot of sparkle, literal sparkle there. But over here, I think, so in the final edit layer, I spend a lot of energy mixing up opaque colors, opaque paint. So now in many respects, I'm behaving like a traditional oil painter, like many of you, painting in a traditional manner, where I mix paints on my palette and apply them to the painting, right? And that's, as I like to say, painting like my daddy did. He was a traditional oil painter. In that regard, the apple has fallen very far from the tree. I tried to paint like him when I was 12. It didn't go very well, but I tried anyway. Forgive me, ADD. So I spend much time in the final edit layer. I spend much time and energy matching the color that's already on my painting, but just coming up with a slightly lighter version of what's already there. Make sense? So of course, because you'd never want to put a slightly darker, if it's opaque, right? Which I'm in the opaque phase. That's what mud is. Now, there's one real strong exception to that rule, and that is when you're doing flesh tones on a portrait. Uh-oh, my wife might be calling. Uh-oh. She is. Okay, tell you what, I can't ignore my wife, so I'll have to answer that call, and I don't know if I'm streaming it or not. Hang on. Hey, sweetie. Yeah, I'm broadcasting, so yeah. Oh, thanks. No, I can't think of anything. Matzah, yeah, matzah bread. Matzah bread. Yeah. Get. All right, thanks, sweetie. Yeah, that's what it. Okay, bye. All right, I think what happens there, you guys can let me know. I think that you can hear me talking, but you can't hear my wife. Is that right? That was my dear wife. She's at the grocery store, will be home soon. Is there anything I needed? And I did, in fact, remember, oh yeah, matzah bread. Get back in touch with my Jewish roots. Which, as far as I can tell, are all in my head. But anyway, I love, for some reason, she thinks I'm weird. She can't stand it, but I love matzah bread. Plain. Well, also in the microwave with cheese melted on it. I like that too. But just plain, dry, unflavored matzah bread. Must be some old Jewish mother in my ancestry somewhere. None to my knowledge. All right, so what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so I spend time matching the colors, and slightly lighter, just slightly lighter than what's already there. And then, as you already know, once I've entered the opaque realm, which I am now in, which for many of you is your whole painting process is opaque. Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I know where I was. There's one exception to the light with opaques and dark with transparent. There's one big exception to that, and that is when you're doing flesh tones on a portrait. There are many times, and again, I would point to my friend who doesn't know me, Mark Carder, does excellent teaching on flesh tones, and I've reflected a lot of his thoughts in my own. Anyway, when you're doing a portrait, many times using the transparent trick, if you will, is just it's too much of a blunt tool. It overdoes it, so to speak. So that's one exception to the get light with opaque and dark with transparent rules. The exception is, when you're doing flesh tones in a portrait. But otherwise, it's a rule that I adhere to pretty regularly. And I'm assuming you can see what I mean about why did I mix up this pale orange color on my brush just a minute ago? The answer is because that's the color that's already here. I'm just mixing up a slightly lighter version of it, okay? I'm also, let me zoom in for just a minute and hope I remember. You're right, David, could be more pinkish perhaps. I like the way it's looking though. I think I'm going to leave it as is. I'm also painting around some abstract pencil marks. You know that trick that I like to do? I don't know why I like it. You know, it's because it looks cool. That's why. That's the only answer I've got. Okay, so at the moment, virtually the entire, no, not virtually, the entire canvas has at least some degree of opaque, of transparent color on it. I'm sorry, wrong word. Transparent color on it, all right? The only part of the painting that has any opaque paint sitting on top, I mean, there's opaque paint underneath some of these layers, but there's a transparent glaze. Anyway, this is the only part that's opaque. And I should mention real quickly that many times like this, I use the term opaque when in fact almost all of what I put down there, technically speaking, is actually translucent. I really can see ever so slightly through this last layer of paint. So I call it opaque. Every once in a while I think to say, oh, wait a minute, you should understand it's not literally opaque. So my bigger point that I want to make is, so this now stands in some kind of contrast. Everything's transparent, this is opaque. That introduces an element of variety to the painting. Does that make sense? And variety is one of the most important aspects of a painting, period. Variety of color, variety of value, variety of texture, variety of marks. Variety is one of the highest values, in my opinion, in any painting. And so I've achieved a little bit of variety just by introducing a little bit of opacity. Now, this is probably the only part of the painting that's going to have that much opaque paint on it. Why? Because it's a focal point, and it's the lightest, brightest part of the painting. That was a sigh, wasn't it? And I'm about to lose my in-ear monitor, sorry to say. what I'm doing right here is actually a little bit of broken color. Excuse me a minute. Let me go see if I can get my other ear monitor working. Hang on a second. Testing. Oh, good. It's working. Yahoo. It's a monitor that I don't use as often. See the big black one? Yes, I know it's pointing up. I think if you're really cool, it points down. But if your ear is shaped the way mine is shaped, it points up. Once again, I'm mixing up whatever color this is on the front of this table here. A little bit of grayish something. A little bit of a hard edge. It's too hard for my taste, so there we go. Now it's soft again. Put a little space between legs here. Okay, I've got this really nice gray. Let me see if there's any place else in the painting that could use this neutral gray shade. And I'm thinking behind this man's head, part of the frame, part of the circle around him. People on the sidewalk over here. Don't know if you can even tell what that is. Doesn't matter. Anywhere else? Nice little gray. Yeah, oh yeah, up here with the umbrella. Why? Because that's the color that part of the umbrella is already almost exactly this color gray. So, bingo. Part of the reason why this this technique works, or I'm matching color, or almost matching color, I think, and I'm struggling to come up with the right terminology. But our eyes really, I know, really do enjoy subtlety. I was talking about it this past weekend. It was a related subject when I was at the Whirligig Festival, typical American, small-town American festival. You know, and I was painting, you know, elephant ears and corn on the cob and turkey legs and loud music and so on and so forth. By the way, let me see if I can fix up this young lady's derriere. Here. I think that'll do. Just came out a little bit too far. Carnivals are, by their very nature, garish. They're appealing, and I'm not complaining. You know, they're fun, in a way. But by their very nature, carnivals are garish affairs. And evidently, human beings, to some degree, enjoy, at least occasionally. I'll say that. I'll plead guilty. My wife and I want to go to the state fair roughly one every 7 years. So we don't enjoy it very much. But anyway, I'm not sure about the length of that skirt. Yeah. So there's a place for, you know, sledgehammer sensory assault. Loud movies are that way, right? A Rambo movie versus, you know, Breakfast at Tiffany's. I'm trying to sound kind of smart by mentioning, you know, kind of a classy, quiet movie. paintings, there is a sense in which, a large sense in which our eyes enjoy, appreciate subtle color shifts. Now that is precisely what you guys are not able to see really well, unfortunately. You're right. I mean, there is no reproduction of a painting that can really, really do justice to the original. Maybe I'm exaggerating, I don't know. I sell, you know, my prints, all my paintings, almost all my paintings are available at Fine Art America. And they do a pretty good job of trying to, you know, capture faithfully. I might change this woman's hair to brown instead of, in reality, she was a brunette. But for some reason, I think I like that better. Yeah, I do. I'm not sure why. It just looks better. I started to say a while ago, once you enter the opaque realm, then this other principle that I talk about all the time, you're sick of hearing it probably, that is, once you've put down an opaque color, especially if it covers any significant area, then it's a good idea to come back and do a slightly lighter, brighter, whiter version on top of that, right? Almost always looks good, and there are not really that many things in painting that you can say almost always looks good, but this is in fact one. So let me come back here and do some of those, some lighter on this table. It has to be essentially the same shade, or very close to it anyway, and lighter. And it almost doesn't matter where you put it. You can just put it anywhere and it'll look good. Like that. That looks good. Now I have a pale warm gray, almost tan under brushes, so let me look around for a place that would look good with that color on it. And most of the time, what I'm looking for is either broken color or somewhere in on the painting that's already has this color, which in this case is, again, one name for it is French gray, which is a brownish gray, very warm gray, very pale. So it's a neutral tone, so that makes me think there's probably a lot of places where it would be appropriate. Okay, I'm almost tired of doing what I'm doing, which often means it's a good idea just to move to something else, but almost. I'm not quite tired, so continue for just a minute. I'm really happy with the way my little DJ guy turned out. I'm pretty happy with my saxophone guy. Tell you what, let's do something that needs doing on the saxophone, and that is a little bit of brass color. And while I'm working on the saxophone, I'm going to finish it up by slapping just a few very small, very intense, very light highlights on it, and then I should be done with the instrument anyway. There. Good enough. I have a pale yellow on my brushes. Let me see if there's any place that would like some of this on it. Yep, right here. It sounded like Bob Ross for a second there, didn't I? To myself. So the difference between, no, not Bob Ross, but the difference between his style of painting and what I'm doing is he was mostly focused on achieving a fairly high degree of similitude, realism, with great economy of stroke. And everybody should know all the Bob Ross brush tricks. Everybody says it's just part of being an artist. You need to know those, but then you need to not use them in profusion as he did. Love to show, not criticizing him. Oh yeah, I've got a place over here in these bottles. I'm going to move you guys for a minute because I know you'll be standing right in front of you. The difference between is he is looking for a high degree of realism with economy of stroke, economy of time, and so on and so forth. I, on the other hand, am aiming for a degree of similitude, but a higher degree of interesting marks, right? I think that's enough for right now. I'm more concerned about brush strokes than I am realism per se, right? You've all, I mean, I've beat that horse to death. Nay. Sorry, same joke every time I say it. So I wonder if anybody watches me anymore. Ooh, that was some nice painting right there. Has that ever happened to you? You do something and then all of a sudden you go, ooh, wow. I didn't know what I was doing, but that turned out really good. That's the way I feel about that little bit of sunlight on the side of the hotel there. And just because I like this color so much, I'm going to add some of it, almost as if it's reflecting off the hotel onto the ice, even though they're in complete, as you can see, they're completely different worlds. So Marlene, was it you're doing a montage? Good for you, bless you. So I'm doing these colors, warm yellow-orange on this edge of the ice sculpture. And I'm covering a lot of area, which means I better come back. I'll do it real quickly. I'm mixing up white with that now, and let's come in here and make sure I do some little bits of lighter, brighter, whiter on top of what I just put down, right? And speaking of Bob Ross brush tricks, I think this is a good time for, yeah. Here, I'll zoom in real quick just to let you see that. No. Do you see that little smear that worked out well. Now, I'll leave you zoomed in there just for a minute. After you smear a highlight like that, you can do it with a finger, a rag, handle of your brush, or in this case, a fan brush. But my trick is then I come back and repaint where this paint was dragged from, right? I had thick paint and I dragged it across the canvas a little bit, leaving the original spot looking a little thin. So the trick is, I don't even know if people will be able to figure out how you did that, but the trick is, I'm going to do it again down here. The trick is paint, smear, and paint again. I want this brush pretty dry. Then again, come back and replace, preferably with a slightly lighter color, replace what you just smeared. Fair enough? Yeah, that's nice. I'm sorry. Susan asked a question. Oh yeah, David commenting, I paint around my line like it was paint by number from my past. That's funny. I do, I suppose. That's funny. And then there were some other funny comments or questions. Let's see. Yeah, don't say I like blondes. Yes, and Susan, most of my opaque is by adding titanium white, exactly. Hello, Artie Mike, good to have you on board. What time is it there? It's 9:15, Northampton, England. Artie Mike, good to have you, buddy. What friend? What the fun is what I meant to say. What fun, my friend. It was 4:20 in the afternoon, so you're 5 hours ahead of us. That sounds about right. Oh, beach life. You comment on Bob Ross. Oh, absolutely. And believe me, I never intend any disrespect toward Bob. I enjoy his program. I think as much, and clearly more than most people. Love what he did. But I do as a teacher, I have to point out, so what's the difference, between what he did and what I'm doing? Oh yeah, it was very enjoyable. We lost him way too early. And David is way up in Quebec and I'm way down in North Carolina, but same time frame. Yep, I agree, beach life as well. All right, I'm getting a little bit tired of what I'm doing. I'm going to follow my sort of natural rhythm and say, okay, enough of that. Enough of what? Well, enough of the warm white highlight stuff I've been doing for here and there for quite a while. Let's launch into this ice. I'm excited about launching into the ice sculpture. So at least for me, that's just one way for me to be productive, instead of, because I'm tempted like you are to go prop my feet up, be lazy, watch TV, or practice my trumpet. That's the difference between a profession and an amateur lover of it. Is for me, practicing trumpet is relaxation and fun. Whereas if it were my job, that would be the chore and the bore, and painting would be fun. Hang on, a little bit of cleanup here. Anyway, one of the ways I try to avoid taking a break and keeping my nose to the grindstone, so to speak, is just so follow, to some degree, follow your natural rhythm. When you get tired of doing something, well, don't quit. Don't go downstairs and, you know, make a sandwich or open a bag of chips. You know, all the stuff, I don't know about you, but all the stuff I'm tempted to do. Instead of doing that, just say, well, is there something else I could paint that would revive me a little bit? And I'm thinking, yeah, I think painting this, and I don't think I have to do too much. I hope I can really keep it minimal, because it's mostly done. I'm going to paint the light blue, the phthalo blue first. Just whatever needs to be intensified or brightened. So here again, I am mixing on my palette opaque colors to match. Not quite match though, slightly lighter than what's already there. And this might be a good time for me to pull reference back up. Yeah, hang on. So I'm going to take this. David not liking my orange curtain, huh? Well, I'll consider it. I will tell you, the rest of you, David knows this, but in years past, my final edit used to be the end. Now, of course, I do broken color after that, and typically, and I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do glaze, again, another glaze. What color? I have no idea, not my job right now to make that decision. And this will get, I think, better. That will be warmed up again. Then I'll wipe. Sometimes I just do glaze and wipe off and that's it. By the way, just for what it's worth, I'm toying with the idea of introducing another stage phase layer to my painting process. It remains to be seen, but I'm thinking about introducing a palette knife stage at the very end, maybe the very last thing that I do, or maybe next to last, before the final glaze. I haven't decided yet. Why? Simply because it dawned on me, actually dawned on me while I was doing my Charleston, South Carolina painting, which I can't wait to get back to. It's leaning up against the wall right behind, in front of you, in front of me there. I can't wait to get back to that. Anyway, it dawned on me that there's a few places in there where a nice, just sharp, flat bit of palette knife would be pleasant. And then it dawned on me, well, wait a minute. You know, I'm all about variety, right? So wouldn't that be an obvious place to introduce a varied texture? And I went, yeah, that would be. Wow, why haven't I thought of that before? So we'll see. We'll see. Again, the driving mindset, thought process is variety. So right at the moment, I'm just applying here and there, little bits of cleaner, brighter, more intense, light phthalo blue. All the phthalo blue that's on there, of course, has a glaze on top of it, so it's a warm glaze mostly, so it's slightly warmed, dulled down. So what I'm doing now is coming in here and there and intensifying little bits of that blue, which I like. That means in a minute I'm going to come back with a lighter version of this, maybe even twice. You know that trick where you come back and do something slightly lighter? Some of you are way ahead of me and you're saying or thinking, well, where do you stop then? Couldn't you do that twice? And the answer is absolutely you could do that twice, or 3 times, or 17 times, although it gets a little extreme after a while. But yeah, certainly doing it twice or 3 times Rarely have I done it 3 times, but not infrequently. The process where you come back and do a slightly lighter on top of what you just put down, that principle, does it ever make sense to do it twice? And the answer is yes, very often. I expect I'll probably do that here because I'm doing so much blue. Can you see I've got one color on my brushes, and I'm doing a whole bunch of painting with this one color, which is the opposite of variety. That's monotony, right? It's like, ooh, that's bad. So please do register that fact. Just that simple principle. One color applied to much of your painting is an unpleasant effect. So there's just one way to deal with that. There are many, but just one way to deal with that is what I'm about to do, which is, as soon as I finish this one color, right now, I'm mixing more titanium white to what I just had on my palette. So now what I've got is a lighter blue. And where do I put it? Almost anywhere. It hardly matters. I'm not really thinking about light source, you know, coming from the top or the left or anything like that. No, it doesn't matter. It can go, it's quite random. One thing I know about painting city landscapes, cityscapes, in sunshine in particular, is that in reality, in the real world, light bounces all over the place. And you can hardly even predict or explain all the crazy gymnastics, if I can use that silly word, that light does, sunlight, bright light, intense light does outside. And so I think very often you can get away with, like I'm doing right now, just introducing bits of light almost without any rhyme or reason. The only limiting factor is that it needs to be pretty much on top of the slightly darker stuff that I just put down a minute ago. Does that make sense? All right, having done that, I'm going to do it again. So another big dab of titanium white. So now I have even paler blue. And I'm going to come in and do it on top of what I did a few minutes ago. By the way, some of these words in here I'm going to make more legible in just a few minutes, but I'm going to do that primarily by negative painting. That is, not by painting the letters, but in fact by painting around them. Make sense? But I think, before I launch into that, I'm going to go ahead and do the almost white outline, not a perfect outline, but outline-ish around this whole ice sculpture. And I want to make it cool. I guess that's almost like a joke, isn't it? It's made out of ice, so what color should it be? Well, it has some warm in it, but I'm seeing most of it as being very, very pale blue. And I am now looking at the photograph again for hints. Now, I want this to look like reflection in ice. Correct? Check. Yes. But what's more important than similitude? Right? Again, I'm thinking about it, especially in the final edit layer, I think about it all the time. What's more important than similitude or realism? My word for realism. What's more important? The answer is interestingness of mark, beauty of mark. By the way, at the moment, again, I'm giving some of you need to be paying attention. I'm giving you a very good lesson on brushmanship. I've talked quite a bit lately about the shock, surprise, dismay memory jogger that I experienced several months ago when I was painting. I was teaching a 3-day painting class out of town. And I looked up and discovered that several early journey painters, in order to achieve a thinness of line, they achieved that by picking up progressively thinner or skinnier brushes. I slapped my forehead, not outwardly. When I'm teaching, I usually do a pretty good job of keeping my teacher poker face, because I'm not there to discourage anybody. But inside I went, what in the world are you doing? And then I went, oh, that's right. I used to do that. Of course, I was 12. A paraphrase of my friend David Stickles' joke, but also it's a little bit funny because it's true. So, you don't use thinner and thinner brushes to create thinner and thinner lines. It's how you handle the brush. So here's, I don't know if you can see how big these are. And these are both kind of worn out. These are gnarly filbert. They're silver brushes. That's a brush company. Silver Grand Prix. Also my favorite brushes in the world. And not very cheap either. I wish I could take better care of my brushes the way Mark Carter does. And Mark, my friend, it just is not in the cards. It's just not going to happen. I think it's too much of an old dog, new tricks kind of thing. Anyway, it's how you hold the brush and how you apply the brush that creates the thinness of line. You almost always paint with the blade of the brush. I say, at least in Dan Nelson's planet, on Dan Nelson's planet, you virtually never paint with the point of your brush. That's what else. That is the other thing that my students were doing. They were holding it like this and painting with the point of their brush. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that, other than just watch me, paint like me, handle your brush the way I handle mine. Oh yeah, that's looking really good now. It's really standing out, the ice sculpture. And come in here into the middle. It was really, the more I look at the photograph and look at the sculpture, quite impressed with the technology and how these guys, or gals as the case may be, this happened to be a guy, I saw him delivering his ice sculpture, setting it up and so forth. Obviously, to me, obviously a computerized carving process to some degree. Because it was an exact replication of the company logo, you know. It wasn't like a rough hand-hewn version of it. No, it was clearly digital. Anyway, and lots of lots of creativity. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. It was very fun. I'm sorry, you guys all know this already. These people, these ice sculpture people. What a fascinating art form. And for this evening, this event that I was at, you know, just gave them that little pop, that little focal point that they needed. And it certainly helped me by giving me a focal point to put at the focal point of my painting. So I would have been really struggling to figure out what to put at the focal point. Sorry to keep using that word over and over. What to put at the center of this painting if they hadn't had this ice sculpture. By the way, part of my business proposal with events like this, one is I tell them I will bring the painting home and finish it. For many, many years past, my business has been I will go to your event and paint it. By the end of the event, the painting will be done and you take it home with you. So I did it many years of that. But as you know, my personal technique style has evolved over the years, and it's gotten more complex or slower, so I can't do that. So now my business proposal is I will come and entertain your people. They'll feel like they've seen, you know, the whole painting process. I started at the, you know, I didn't start ahead of time. I started when there were people there, and indeed, I think they all had a good time. But then I say, but then I'll bring it home and turn it into a top-notch or world-class or whatever you want to, you know, first-class painting. Not just a fast painting. And the other thing I do for them is I will provide them with a digital photograph that I'll take myself, because I'm quite experienced at shooting my paintings. So I'll take a picture and deliver that to them as well, and they have permission to use the image any way they want. So they seem to be happy with that, and I'm certainly happy with it. It's part of the reason that I'm being paid quite well. So if anybody's listening to me, if you're in charge of an organization that wants a live event painting, yes, I'd be delighted. I'd work all over the country. There. Does that look nice and sparkly? I think so. Okay, now I'm going to stick with the ice sculpture for a little while, and I'm going to negative paint the reverse, paint the spaces between. Like this says the word celebrating. This says 1984 to 2019. And those two words, oh, and this says years. So I'm going to try to mix up whatever color that is in the background. And clearly it's got some green in it and some blue in it and some yellow ochre in it. So again, trying to match whatever's there, perhaps slightly lighter than what's already there. In this stage of the painting process, I don't use, let's see how close I am. Pretty close. I want to add a little more phthalo to that and a little bit lighter. I don't really use liquid, but I do actually only enough to help the paint flow. So it's not like a painting strategy, if you will. It's not part of the process. I just use it. Okay, C-E-E-L-E, I think I'm going to say this is an E. This right here, by the way, is a good trick. It's not foolproof, but it's a good trick for painting lettering. You've heard me talk many times. C-E-E-B-R. It's a good trick for painting words or letters in your painting without slipping into penmanship, right? You do not want to you don't suddenly want to slip into penmanship, as they say. You want to stay in painting mode. One of the ways to accomplish that, or help accomplish it, is to paint the negative, paint around the letters. So having said that, I've had students that say, oh, what a great idea, and then they stick out their tongue and do such extreme tongue painting in reverse that it has the same effect. It was still way too tight compared to the rest of the painting. So just doing the negative painting does not solve it completely, but it is a good trick to keep in mind. whoops, we have static, don't we? Hang on, gang. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know if it's been staticky all night, so sorry if it has been. Up to my old tricks right here of painting around an abstract pencil mark. I've talked about that quite a bit. Why does that seem to feel good? And I have a guess. That's all it is. You know, I make these, as you may have seen, I make often late in the process. I just take my pencil and just make completely abstract scribbling marks. Why does it look good? And I think part of the reason is because when I do that, it lends an air of intentionality to those marks. So nobody could look at them and think that they were a mistake. They're clearly done on purpose, because not only did I draw them, then I came back later and painted around them. So I think then in that state, the viewer relaxes and says, huh, well, that's interesting. I don't know why he did that, but he clearly did it on purpose. And then in that state, like I say, in that state of relaxedness, C-E-L, then their brain is free to go, oh, you know what? And it actually looks kind of cool. Does that make sense? Whereas if they feel like it's a mistake, then their brain doesn't go, oh, cool. The brain goes, that's weird. I don't know why I did that. All right, and I'm not even positive that's all correct, but that's the best guess I have. All I know is that it looks cool. I'm trying to figure out, why does it look cool? Why do I think it looks cool anyway? And we can't quite read the word celebrating. I think in this painting, the word should be barely legible. Barely, but legible. So let me come in here and try to clean it up a little bit. C-E-L-E. My most famous, most familiar, most common mistake when I'm doing something that says to misspell a word, because I'm not thinking about letters. I'm not thinking about spelling. I'm thinking about shape. Same thing with calligraphy. I make so many mistakes because C-E-L-E-B-R-A. Now I'm definitely overdoing the pencil here, but that's all right, because I'm going to come back in just a minute and paint again on top of it, and some of this pencil will get obliterated, diminished, covered up. Now that pencil would be completely inappropriate if it weren't for the fact that there's pencil everywhere else, here and there throughout the painting. So I think I can get away with it. I'm going to pick up a smaller brush. By the way, my comments about, you know, you don't do fine lines by picking up smaller. Don't misconstrue that. That doesn't mean you can't, like I am right now, you can't at times use small brushes. But even so, notice the manner in which I'm holding this brush. Never mind the fact that I'm holding it with my wrong hand, with my left hand. Why am I holding it with my left hand? Well, because my left hand doesn't have nearly the control that my right hand does. So if I'm painting with my left hand, there's less of a danger. There's still a danger, but there's less of a danger that I'm going to slip into overdoing it. I just switched to right. So I'm in danger of overdoing it. There we go. It's just almost legible. By the way, this issue of legibility in lettering and words in a painting, in my opinion, falls into the 80-20 rule. If you want to know if you've nailed that legibility, you know, there's a balance between yes legible and no legible. One of the ways you know that you've hit it is if roughly 20% of your audience, so to speak, can't read it. That's a hard lesson to learn, because most people, it's a real hard business lesson for business people to learn. I've talked about this quite a bit. Business people, when they design their logo, for instance, the logo is a classic example of this. They want everybody to, quote unquote, get it. No, why would we have a logo if people can't get it? But in fact, you want a certain percentage of the population not to get it. Like, they can't see it. Now here, let me show you, act out for you exactly what does happen when you're interacting with a person who doesn't get it. Like, they won't be able, I don't get it, I can't read, I can't see it. And then you point it out to them. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. And again, this is roughly, not a scientific number, but roughly 20% of the population fits this category, fits this description. So you point it out to them, and instead of being all excited, like you feel like they ought to be like, oh, now I get it. This 20%, they don't do that at all. I mean, usually they don't do it at all. They go, huh. In other words, they don't care. They literally don't care, because, and this is hard for us, those of us who are artists, if you're an artist, it's because you have intuitively a higher degree of visual acuity, is my favorite word, sophistication, than most of your friends and neighbors and spouses and family members. That's just the way it is. See, that's why you're an artist, because you see things that other people don't see. That is literally true. Well, guess what? At the far end of the spectrum, I'm saying about 20% of the population, not only do they not see what you see, and if you point it out to them, basically what I'm saying is you're wasting your breath, because even after you point it out to them, they don't go into rapturous experience of like, oh, I see it now, that's so cool. See, that's what an artist does. But somebody who's real low on the visual acuity scale, they do not do that. They go, so? So if you wonder, why do you not want everybody to get it? And again, I've talked about this before. This applies to, like, I learned this so many times the hard way. Is designing logos for companies. You absolutely want a certain percentage of the population to not get it. And here's one of the ironies. Usually people that are bosses of companies, for some reason, if they're real high in business skill, almost by definition, they're real low on visual skill. Because those two skills, as we all know, most artists are not good at business. Conversely, most business people are not good at visual acuity. So anyway, many times it's the man or woman in the corner office who is the hardest person to win over with a new logo, because they want everybody to get it. And what you need as the artist, you need to point out to them that if you in fact design a logo that everybody gets, then you're in fact boring 80% of the population to tears. Like, most logos are lousy. Now, not the big corporate ones. By the way, why does a corporation have to pay, you know, I'll be extreme and silly, $250,000 for a new logo? Like if Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Microsoft They will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a new logo. Why? Is it because the artists, given the assignment, can't come up with a good idea for $200? The answer is no, absolutely they can. The reason the company is paying hundreds of thousands of dollars is because that's what it takes to convince visual bozo in the corner office, and I say that with affection. No, I don't. I say it with a bad attitude. The guy who's in the, or gal who's in the corner office is a visual dunce. And the only way to convince him or her that this is a good logo is by doing piles and piles and piles of focus groups and so on and so on and so on and so on and so forth. And then little by little, he or she will get convinced. Oh, okay, I guess. And all those focus groups is what costs all the money. Some of you, I'm introducing you to a whole world that you know nothing about, and that's all right. Welcome to the world of a graphic designer. When I first became a full-time artist back in, well, yeah, full-time artist. I was part-time for a long time before this, but full-time artist was 1978, I guess. And when I first started out, I had to do graphic design because I wanted to be an illustrator more, but I couldn't, for a while, I couldn't get enough illustration jobs, so I doubled as a, this is before computers, of course. That was fun back in the good old days. Sorry you missed it. Anyway, so I did do graphic design, and that's designed quite a few logos over the years. Still actually do, every once in a while, design one. Here's how I do it. I don't charge them $100,000. I say, I tell you what, I'll design you a logo for $100 and a cup of coffee. I'm going to design it right there at the table in front of you. So by the time we leave the meeting, you know what it's going to look like and you're happy with it. And then I said, now listen, and boy, I'm getting more and more and more serious about this. I mean, I said, but if you go home and change your mind and change the logo, you will get an invoice from me for $5,000. And the older I get, the more absolutely, and people now know, they, down to, then they're all scared, like, can I make any suggestions at all? And I say, well, I don't know. Depends what it is. Most of the time the answer is no. And anyway, that's what I do. You can do whatever you want. But that's related to this. How legible do I want this to be? Let me zoom in just for a second. Yeah, that's pretty legible, I think. I'm going to go in and add just a little bit of sparkle, literal sparkle to that. The same color I was doing earlier, very, very, very light blue. There we go. So does that make sense? Now, of course, this is so big, that's easily legible because it's big. This, TAA, easily recognizable. But this small stuff, that's just about a boundary. Any smaller than that, I would not want it to be legible. Down here it says Triangle Apartment Association. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm off your screen. Down here it says Triangle Apartment Association. And I'm debating whether I want that to be legible at all. Probably not. Just because in order to make it legible, I would have to get too tight and it would not fit with the rest of the painting. All right, I feel like I am boring. I feel like I'm being boring. Well, thanks, Barbara, about approaching a lily doll. I should do that. Good night, Artie Mike. Sorry I missed you. David suggests that I'm spending too much time. It's possible. I don't think I am. It has, you know, I want to achieve the right balance of legibility, and that takes time. But I might be wrong. David might be right. 1980. I'm negative painting again, mixed up a dark, dirty green. To paint around these numbers. That might be good enough right there. All I need to do now is come and add a little bit of sparkle to that. Right? As I said, I fear I'm getting really boring, so I'm going to take a break. I'm going to end this broadcast here. Oh, I have to do the word years up there. Okay, I thought I was all done with the lettering, but I'm not. But I don't need to do that online. You've seen plenty enough. Thank you, gang, for your company, your presence, your chatting. And I'm happy about the fact that the ice sculpture is clearly coming off as the focal point of the painting, which was my original intent. All right, let me see if there's any other chats I absolutely need to see. You are very welcome, Barbara. Thanks for saying thank you. Thanks to the rest of you. Appreciate your company again. And I hope to broadcast again at least by tomorrow. If not sooner, there's a good shot of my messier than normal studio. Hey, before I go, just here's a painting that I started a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm really excited about this one. This is a plein air painting in Charleston. That might be a competition painting. All right, bye y'all.